The heart of a father is the masterpiece of nature. Abbe Prevost, French priest, author, and novelist. All right. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. All right. So, first and foremost, um, looks like I did not do things in the right order. So, there is no stream to Facebook. So, if you're not watching from Facebook because it's not streaming, I apologize. And later I'll put this up and it'll make more sense to you. Okay, I'm being a little absurd. Anyway, so I'll get that video posted or something a little bit later. Just made a mistake this morning, went out of order. Anyway, what do we got this week? What do we got this today? Not this week, today. Well, I'm going to recap the week in the context of being a dad. I'm going to talk about some of the different stories. I'm going to answer some cues, not directed to me, but just in general, being asked in some dad groups. And anytime during this episode, if you're watching live, you can throw an ask me anything type question and I'll answer it. Um, Try and keep them to dad related, but like you're the audience, you do what you do, right? If you're listening via podcast, I want to apologize for the blast of shows that you just had. I got behind, and if you're listening to this episode, or when you're listening to this episode, just know that you are all caught up, right? So you are up to date with all the podcast episodes, and there will not be a blast of them. Basically, the way this show works is, I do my best to make sure that every day, Monday through Friday, I'm streaming. Some weeks are easier than others. And some weeks, some days are a bit of a challenge because family and work will take priority. Speaking of, if at any time during the show, if anybody wants to chime in and let me know, like, hey, DL, if you want to let me know, the best place to let me know is here. Like I can just throw it out. I generally try to post to like locals or on social media like X. But like just kind of let me know, like, or maybe you don't care. Maybe you're just like whatever, DL. I've got you tagged on YouTube or Rumble. I follow you on X. On I keep wanting to say Twitter. I follow you on X, so therefore I'll just see it when it comes up. And if you're not there, you're not there. Like maybe that's it. No big deal. So, yeah, for example, yesterday was dads and donuts at my son's school. Now, here's the fun part of this. Initially, it was intended to be at 8:30 a.m. and I thought, okay, well, if I stream at 7:30, if I just because his school's not far from me. So I was like, all right, I could stream from like 7:30 to like 8, just make it a really short show. And that'll work. But then the night before, I got an email and they were like, "Hey, we had such a great turnout. We're opening the doors early, so if you want to show up at 7:30, feel free." And I was like, "Man, I better show up at 7:30 because it sounds like there's a lot of dads showing up, which is a good thing. It's a good problem to have, but I didn't want to be like showing up kind of later or what would have been the normal time. And then maybe they were out of donuts or whatever. So I thought, what, let me just go at 7:30 to make sure that this happens because he's still got to go to school. So, there, me and my son, we went and had donuts at his school and tried to chat up a couple dads and that men when they get together, kind of it's iffy whether they strike up a conversation. But there were some nice dads. So that's what I was doing yesterday. I was having fun eating donuts, which I almost never do, like almost never, like once a year at most. So, all right, before before I recap the show, let's see here. Yes, reiterate. It looks like you're not on Facebook. That is correct, because I did things out of order. My VA lady says. She's gonna be mad at me because she's gonna be like, "Don't you got a checklist?" Yes, but I went out of order. Because sometimes I just got the screens up in the wrong places or moving them around, and then I accidentally click a button too soon. The way it works is you have to set up the stream on Facebook first. You have to have it set and waiting for the stream to come in. And if you don't do that, then what ends up happening is it doesn't pick up the stream. So, like if I start the stream and then start the Facebook live stream, the stream has already kind of been sent, and I guess it doesn't get sent again. It's not like a perpetual like. I'm not really sure exactly how this works. You might think I would because I do technology, but I didn't build it, so I don't really know. But my guess is that you basically one shot. It sends out a request and says, hey, or not a request, but it sends out a signal and says, "Hey, here's a stream." And if Facebook is ready, it says, "Oh, great," and it grabs the stream and it plays it. But if you do it the other way around, then the stream has already been sent. Then Facebook is like, "Okay, where's the stream?" And Rumble's like, "Yeah, I already sent it to you." Right? That's kind of how it works. So that's what's going on. Um, I uh, Rumble Rant here. What's it going to take for Liberty Dad to print out some checklist from start to finish when it comes to starting the podcast to when it's uploaded on the podcast? See, this is the trouble I get into. I'm actually working on it. I actually have it already started. And what I've been doing is slowly kind of adding things to that list. Like, oh, when I do this, oh, when I do this. So it's slowly being built. But that's what we've got. Joe says, "We know you're a human, and you have." Well, yes, I am a human. There's that, but that was my misspeak. We know you have human and dog kids. Do you also have legal plant kids? Um, yes, I do have legal plant kids. Not sure this is the direction you are asking. However, just yesterday, I took so we have this stand-up planter box. It's probably about 4 feet long by about a foot and a half wide, and probably about 10 inches deep. And I had previously taken bell peppers from the store, grabbed the seeds, and planted them, and was able to grow. And then after waiting like 8 months, they started flowering. And then I got some bell peppers, and I was excited. Except for and I don't have a picture of them, but they were tiny. They were they were so small that, like, even me, 5'3", 120 pounds, I could put one in my hand and close my fist, and you wouldn't be able to see it. They were very, very tiny. And, I pointed that out on social media, and one of my followers was like, "Oh, yeah, you made a mistake. Those are gonna be, like, proprietary seeds. You're gonna have to go get heirloom seeds." So I went and I got heirloom seeds, and so yesterday, we actually just started planting again. So I ripped out all the old plants that were in there that were producing these tiny itty bitty little. I mean, they look like they were bell peppers for like a gnome. You know what I mean? Like, or if you're really old, if you're an old like me, and you remember the borrowers, like they would have been pretty good size for the borrowers. The little people that live in the house and always end up taking. Like, you may not know that story, but the borrowers were people that lived inside the walls. They're very, very tiny, and whenever the normal sized human beings would lose something, it was always because the borrowers took it, hence the name The Borrowers. So anyway, so they were too small, and that wasn't gonna work, and then it's like I waited 8 months for these tiny little things, and I only got, like, 3 of them. So we replanted some things yesterday. We planted carrots, and then we didn't actually plant the bell peppers because the seeds need to be germinated, so we're gonna be doing that. But we planted, let's see, what did we plant? We planted carrots, we planted green beans, and we planted something else. What was there was something else I thought. Oh, tomatoes. Yes, we planted some tomatoes. So a little bit late in the season, but we're going to give it a go and see what happens. It's Florida, so there's a lot of flexibility, I think. So yeah, actually, I do have some legal plants here, so we'll see. All right. So before I recap, um, let me just tell you the recap that I'm going to give you. I'm not going to go into all my normal debates and all that other stuff. Okay. Um, I'm just going to tell you from the perspective of being Liberty Dad, just like a dad perspective, just like the whatever thoughts come to mind. Okay. So I'm not going to hash it out. I'm not going to give you my political opinion. I'm not going to break it down. I'm not going to do any of that. So I'm like, what's a simple and quick perspective from a dad? But before I do that, let me just tell you, I'm gonna be a nicer Liberty Dad. I've been thinking about it for a while, and like the show is designed to inform people and to demonstrate to them how much you can learn about any topic by leading by example. And there's a time and place for fiery words, which I've noticed that I've kind of been using more and more, like calling people retard and idiot, and insulting them, stuff like that. And that's not really what the brand is supposed to be. However, as with anything, there's a time and a place for everything. And so I'm not going to get rid of it totally. I'm just going to maybe dial it down so that, the latter can focus on the former, the leading by example. Did I get that right? I think I got that wrong. But anyway, the idea being we want to focus on the fact that you, as an everyday person, can learn a great deal about any particular topic. All it takes is reading and using a little bit of logic and rationale. So we're going to focus more on that, and a little bit less on being fiery. That doesn't mean it won't happen, especially for tyrants. They're going to get a lot less effort. But let's say it's just some influencer out there. I'm going to dial it down and just be a little bit nicer, a little bit. I make no promises. Somebody might irritate me, and then I'll be like, "God, you're being dumb," and sometimes that needs to be said, but we're going to try to make that sometimes a little bit less frequent. All right. Recap this week. Man, so much has happened this week, like a lot. And there's a lot of conversation. My feed on social media has basically been Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf, that story, Dave Smith versus Douglas Murray, and then the Abrego Garcia story. That's the Maryland man that was sent to the prison in El Salvador. And then yesterday you had the FSU shooting, and then also this week, the New York Times uh, wrote an article which I haven't read yet. I'm going to read about ADHD, and from what I can tell, it seems like the article points out that hey, we've been over medicating our kids. So we'll start with that one. ADHD. As a dad, I look and I say, my son is a rambunctious little boy. He has trouble paying attention when it's time to sit down and do his homework. Sometimes when you're trying to tell him something, you give him some instructions. You're like, all right, so I want you to take the dog out. And he'll just be like, yeah, because like you can't ride on a dog because they're not a horse. And you're like, what does that have to do with taking the dog out? Like you just will say stuff, and I don't think it's ADHD. I just think it's a normal little boy growing up, learning how to rein in all the thoughts and emotions that he has, right? Like, he has to learn how to do this. And it is a challenge. It's a challenge for him, and it's a challenge for me as a dad. And sometimes I got to be like, hey, focus, sit there, let's pay attention. Like if we're doing his homework, he'll do that same thing. We'll be like, what's 7 plus 2? And he'll be like, 9, because nine, blah, blah, blah. And he'll like think of something that had related to nine. They'll just go on. And it's like he wants to tell you the story. And you're like, back up. Let's bring it back. Like, that's a cool story and all, but let's bring it back because we're focusing on schoolwork right now. So for me, I'm glad that this is happening as a dad, because I think we have I know I've talked about this before about how we've over medicated our children. And I think it's a problem. And I think part of the problem is that we're trying to force children, particularly little boys, into behaving in ways that are more typical for little girls or adults, right? Like if you ask me to sit in a class and pay attention and take notes, I will be able to do that because I'm an adult and I've had many years to practice working on that. My note taking isn't so impressive, but I can do it. But if you ask my son to sit down, he's not so good at it necessarily. It depends on what it is. If you ask him to sit down and watch a Minecraft show on YouTube, like good luck getting his attention. He's hyper focused on that. But if you ask him to sit down and do his homework, it's a big challenge to keep his attention. So it just kind of depends. So I'm glad to see that. I'm looking forward to reading the article, and depending on what I read, I may have some thoughts about it, and maybe we'll do a show on it next week. So we'll see. The FSU shooting, another horrible tragedy. It happened just yesterday, so I'm not familiar with the details yet. Normally, for these kind of things, I just kind of let it go. I give it like 24, 48 hours because usually the details that are coming out are never, accurate. And as a dad, to bring this into being a dad, I want to teach my son to be mindful of what he hears and what he takes as, facts and information. And I want him to recognize, like, I mean, we don't talk about this because it's a shooting and he's 6, but as he gets older, he'll hear about these things, and then he will see that, hey, dad's not making a big conversation about this just yet. And then I'll tell him, like, the reason that I'm not making this a big conversation is because this just happened. Details are still unfolding. We don't know everything just yet. And there have been plenty of cases where there've been like a shooting and somebody says, like, oh, 6 people have been killed. And then you find out it was like 12 people or 3 people, right? Like the facts of the matter can be drastically different. And the reality is these kind of events, they cause stress for people, right? Like, cause like, if you're thinking about it, you're like, man, what if my son was going to college there and he was one of the victims, right? Like those are the kinds of things that you naturally will think about. So in order to combat that, to kind of keep the stress levels down, I try to just like, all right, there's an incident that's happened. Whatever the case is, it is tragic. Like I can say that from the very beginning. It's tragic. So I'll be keeping an eye on that and seeing what we hear. Probably going to have to next week do another show to combat all the anti-gun rhetoric. I'm sure those folks are already out there in force with all their talking points. If they are, and if they come up with anything new or something I need to address, I'll put that on the schedule for next week as well. What else am I talking about? Let's see. Abrego Garcia. Now, this one has been taking up my time. I've talked about this and then talked some more and then talked some more. In fact, you might think that this is the only story that I care about. And that's not quite true, but it is dealing with due process, which I believe he did not get. And as a dad, my son's going to get older, and perhaps one day the authorities will come and say, hey, we believe that your son has done a thing. We need to arrest him, right? Or he'll get arrested. Perhaps. I mean, hopefully not, but perhaps. And not so perhaps he will have not done whatever he's accused of. Okay. Because then I'll be upset. But let's say he's accused of something. I want him to have a fair trial. I want him to have a fair go in the legal system. I don't want the government to come and do something and then backtrack later and say, well, look at all this information that we've discovered after the fact. Like, no, he was afforded due process. You accused him of something. He has the right to challenge that accusation. And there is a process for which we have in this country. And I want that to be applied to him. So I fight for due process because I believe due process is what protects me and my family. And the way to ensure that it is there to protect me and my family is to ensure that other people get it too, even if they end up being a terrible person. So it's possible that Abrego Garcia is exactly who the government says he is. It's possible that he is a gang member with MS-13 and has engaged in human trafficking and other violent acts, right? It's possible, but he has to have due process. And I don't believe that he got the proper due process. We're not going to go into it in detail. I've talked about it before. I might talk about it again. And I fight that argument so that one day, if my son is being accused, that due process will be there for him. Or if my wife or me or anybody in my family is accused, right? Or even some friends. That's really all it's about. I look and I say, what do I want? What kind of world do I want for my son? Well, I want one where if he's accused, he has a fair chance at saying, challenging that and saying, no, I didn't do that. And here's the evidence toward that. Right now, he can't prove that he didn't do something, but you can put evidence forward that would kind of suggest that you didn't. Right. Like if they said, hey, you did this thing over at this grocery store at 7 p.m. on Thursday. And you're like, well, at 7 p.m., here's my credit card receipt for when I was shopping on the other side of town. Right. Like that doesn't prove you didn't do something. It just kind of proves that, like, hey, the accusation doesn't have a lot of merit because you can prove that you were somewhere else. So I want him to have a fair shake and I want everybody to have a fair shake. So I fight that battle. Let's see what else. Dave Smith versus Douglas Murray. That one was all over my feed, all over. Dave Smith, if you don't know, he is a libertarian comedian, and he also happens to be very knowledgeable on the Middle East and foreign policy in general. And he could, as we saw and have seen, he can debate a number of people, and he can talk for hours on the topic. And I think that's great. And what does this have to do with being a dad? Well, a lot of the problems that we ran into when we were on social media, when we were talking about this, and what Dave ran into for the first 45 minutes of the show, Douglas Murray, he basically fought this credential fight. He was kind of being a credentialist. And so what he ended up doing was just kind of like for the first 45 minutes, criticizing Dave Smith for and others for being an expert, but not being an expert. Like you talk about it a lot, but you're not an expert. And part of his gripe, to be fair to him, was that he saw this, Douglas saw this as you guys are being treated as experts because you're getting so much airtime, but you're not experts. And he was kind of saying, I think you guys are hiding behind this. I'm not an expert so that you can talk freely and not be held to the same standards of experts. And now I disagree with him on that. I think there's some fairness, but I don't think, I think he's missing some specific elements. And I think those elements are in the podcast world, in the um, TikTok world, the social media world, things operate differently. And so, what I hope to do with my son is raise him up so that if he goes into a space, he can read the room and understand what is the vibe here. So, if you enter into the intellectual space where all the credentialed intellectuals are, there are going to be forms and formalities for which you are expected to adopt and adhere to. If you go into the podcast space, if you're streaming and you're on social media, there are different forms and formalities in effect. And so, what I would want my son to be able to do is recognize the difference. I think that was probably Doug's, I don't know if I can call him Doug, but that was his biggest issue is that he entered into a space without fully understanding the norms of that particular space. They're different than the ones that he's used to. In the podcast space, we don't care about the letters behind your name. We don't care about the credentials. I mean, we do. We'll say, "Hey, this guy's got, 4 bachelors and a PhD. He's a really smart guy." However, once we start talking about a topic, that stuff doesn't matter anymore. It's just nice as, to describe you and say, "Hey, here is here's about this person and their achievements." So we set it at achievement level, but then you still have to demonstrate and engage in the ways that have kind of popped up, I guess, if you will, in the podcast and the social media space. So I would want my son to recognize those things because the reality is we all interface with spaces that are different at different times. Like sometimes I go to an event and it's a suit is required. Well, I need to have a suit ready so that I can go. Like my wife has a real estate event where they're having like a big party, it's generally considered like, hey, this is cocktail wear or something like that, but formal wear. And so you need to have your formal wear ready for those kind of events. You also need to understand how to properly wear them, how not to. For instance, should you button one button or two buttons or whatever, on your sport coat, those kind of things. And so I want my son to be able to basically navigate in and out of different spaces and recognize the space that he's in and say, okay, I need to adapt. It's like that Bible verse. I'm not a particularly religious guy, but I know a few Bible verses. But it's like that Bible verse where Paul is saying, like, when I speak to the Gentiles, I speak as a Gentile. When I speak to the Jews, I speak as a Jew. He's basically like, look, I adapt myself for the audience. That doesn't mean that he's faking it necessarily. This isn't the campaign trail where you go to the southern state and you adopt a southern drawl that you don't actually have, right? Like that's not what that means. It just means like, hey, for the things that for the formalities, you should understand that. You should understand that if you go to the south, bless your heart is not a nice thing to say, right? So you shouldn't go down there and then think you know what you're saying and be like, try to compliment somebody by going, "Bless your heart," like because they're gonna be like, "What?" Right? Like you need to understand, and you don't have to understand it in full. You just have to understand it enough, the major things, because people tend to be very forgiving in any space. If they see that you're trying, they will recognize that you understand that you're in a different space and that there's a certain level of respect. So here's a good example. One of the things I've heard over the years is that when you go over to Europe, I think particularly in France, if you go in and you just start speaking English everywhere, people will that can speak English will act like they can't speak English because they'll be annoyed because it's like, wait a minute, you came here to another country where English is not the primary language, right? It's not the national language, and you speak it as if you're still in the United States, right? Like everybody should just be speaking English. And so they get irritated with you and they'll just kind of like turn their back or ignore you or whatever, right? But if you go to a shop and you're trying to speak French, they'll give a little laugh, but then more than likely you're going to find that if they can speak English, they will, right? Because you basically made a good gesture of faith and you said, "Look, I'm trying to do things the right way and I will embarrass myself just to show you that I have a certain respect for your space." Same concept applies with the Dave Smith versus Douglas Murray debate. I don't think Douglas came in and respected the space. And I think that's why he got so much heat. And I think a lot of people that are on his side, I think they also don't recognize the space that he was in. So if it were my son, whether he was the Dave Smith, who happens to be what I would say is an expert on a given topic, because you can talk about it at length for hours with intellectuals and with average everyday people, and you're, quoting name or you're quoting um, statements from people, you're naming names, you're giving dates, you're connecting dots, you're doing all like, okay, great. That's awesome. I have no problem if my son were to be that way. I also have no problem if my son were to go the more intellectual route and uh, go to college, study really hard, get PhDs, write papers, be congratulated by other intellectuals. Either one of those is great. Just remember, son, when you go into a space, you need to have your head screwed on straight and you need to be aware of the room so that you can operate in a way that's meaningful. So that's what I got to say about that. Let's see. Last one. Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf. Like I said in the past, I did one show on this. I think it's a tragedy. I think that two young men should be able to quarrel with each other without it leading to a serious violent event. I think at best, and I'm not advocating for any kind of altercation, but at best or at worst, I guess, it should have ended in a fight that could have been broken up by other people that were there. And then the end of the story. That unfortunately did not happen. That would have been my view of the worst case scenario that would have been acceptable. So that's unfortunate. And as far as all the back and forth, so in the court of public opinion, people aren't so good at giving you the benefit of the doubt. That's the way that it works. People are split. They're divided on this particular topic. It seems like people either full on support Carmelo Anthony or full on support Austin Metcalf. And every new bit of content is something to bolster their perspective. Um, what do I think as a dad? I think it would be the most horrible thing to be a dad and to get a call that your son died because he got stabbed. I also think it would be a horrible call if somebody called up and said, your son is accused of stabbing a kid and the kid died. Neither one of them are a situation that I ever want to find myself in. Neither one. And so I have to think about these situations and go, what what can I teach my son to help him not be in this situation? So from the Carmelo Anthony standpoint, one, you should not be carrying weapons at places that are, that you're not supposed to be carrying them because it's already that it goes against you if something happens. So the very fact that Carmelo Anthony had a knife at a track meet, we all know that no school permits weapons for students, right? Like that's a given. Nowhere in this country does a school, to my knowledge, permit a student to carry any kind of a weapon at a school function. So that already is a strike against him. So I have to tell my son, like, look, do not be carrying weapons when you don't belong. Because if you end up using it, even if you end up using it in self-defense, that's going to go against you. And that's not going to help you in court. It's just going to be evidence that something about you is, that you got a bad character. Number two, I would teach him, if you happen to have a weapon or there's one close by and you have to use it as the absolute last resort. There should be ample evidence that you were fearing for your life before you used a weapon against somebody, period. And if you don't have that, then you should not be using a weapon of any kind. Okay. And then on the Austin Metcalf side, and again, this is just going from what I understand of the story. I would tell my son, I would say, son, do not ever touch somebody. Do not do not make the first physical contact ever, unless like if somebody's pulling out their gun to shoot you, then sure, that's a different story. But without something extreme like that, do not be the first person to make contact. And the reason for that is because you don't understand you have no concept of how somebody else will take it. Austin Metcalf, and according to the story, he went to grab and physically remove Carmelo Anthony. And I think that was a huge mistake because, again, that could have ended up in just a simple fight, or as it did, it ended up in getting stabbed in the heart. Um, you don't know how somebody else is going to perceive that act of aggression against them. And would I like it if everybody just said, "Okay, this guy's just grabbing me to remove me. It's not a threat. I don't need to escalate this to, you know, a significant level of violence." I would love that. But that's not the case. So I'm gonna have to teach my son, do not touch people. Don't touch them, don't lay a finger on them unless it is an extreme situation and it is a matter of life and death, for you, life or limb. Life or limb for you or somebody else. Um, and then there may be some edge cases beyond that, but for the most part, don't touch people. Not a good idea. So that's what I would tell him. And I would tell him, and I like the fact that I had his coach on a while back. I can't remember which episode, but as his jujitsu coach on, and the jujitsu coach tells people, he tells the kids right now, like these are all like somewhere between like 5 and 8 years old, 10 years old, something like that. So he's got him in his class, and he tells him, he's like, does it mean you're a scaredy cat or you're a this or a wimp or whatever if you run away from a fight? And they're like, and he gets them to say, no, it's not. Like sometimes, in many cases, that is your best answer, to get away. Just get away from the situation. And it's hard for boys because boys have egos, but 17-year-old boys, not 6-year-old boys, but boys have egos and they want to flex their ego, and it leads to conflict. But what I love about the instructor is that he reinforces this idea that it is better to leave the situation than to feel like you're brave enough or you're tough enough to take it on. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. And you don't want to find out that you were not the hard way. So better off, you know, backing up and just leaving the situation, which is tough. I get it. So that's my recap of this week's events. Let's see. Any other comments in here? Let's see. Yes, that Liberty Lady says we need to stop having soft targets. I know so and so would say no guns. I think the opposite when it comes to schools. I agree. Yes, the we need. I wouldn't say more guns in school per se, um, but I do believe that we should be able to. We should permit teachers, if they so choose, to be armed. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with having an officer that's there to protect students and will actually protect them, not the kind that sits back behind the car while kids are getting shot up. I want the kind that's going to go in there because pretty much every parent would go in unarmed to fend off an assailant from shooting their children. And so I don't think it's unreasonable to say we should have somebody on site who is armed, who is also willing. And we could have a conversation later about how that works out and all the challenges that go with it. But I think it's possible. I think it's doable, and I think it's appropriate. Let's see. Do. Let's see. I just saw dictator Lenny Curry on the TV about the FSU shooting. That guy needs to crawl back under a rock and go back to drunk tweeting. I don't know about the drunk tweeting there because I don't know. I mean, I guess he has. I don't know. Or maybe that's just a way of taking a jab at him. But I don't know. I haven't seen it, so I can't criticize him. But I have plenty of criticism, not size him, criticism for him. All right, let's take a look at some of these dad talk, these dad post from a dad group. So what I did here is I went to a dad group and I just kind of scrolled and I said, all right, what are some questions that I could answer that aren't like some of these guys write really, really long stories. And I'm like, I'm not going to read that on there. That's just way too long. It's like, here's my novella. Now tell me what I should do. And no disrespect to the guys. Sometimes you're trying to lay out and give everybody enough information to make an assessment and give you some advice. And that's cool. But for this show, it's just not going to work. So here's an anonymous guy. He says, girlfriend cheated, advice needed. I'm going to give you the simplest, easiest advice. Let her go. That's it. Let her go. We could probably use some music here. How about some music? There we go. Do some music just for the fun of it. Let her go. I dated a girl when I was in my early 20s, and I was a little bit unwise, and I got cheated on more than once before I finally got my head, got my thick head out of my rear, and I let her go. It just wasn't going to work. And at girlfriend stage, like I feel like for me now in our relationship with my wife, we have a one shot rule. You screw it up, it's over. Like that's our rule. Like there is no second chances. There are no second chances. Not for that. Um, other couples can decide on their own. So I'm not going to tell you what to do. But I do think that if there's going to be any kind of infidelity that that the relationship can recover from, it would be in marriage, not in girlfriend stage. Like it's kind of like when you get a job. Like remember back in the day, you would get a job and you'd be on like this 3-month probationary period, like to see how you do, and they could just let you go for like any reason. You were like not considered a full on employee. You got like 3 months. I think of it kind of like that. And when I would get a job, I would make sure like it was my like that 3 months, zero mistakes, not late 1 minute, no smarting off to anybody, no failure of my work, nothing. Look like the absolute best employee ever. Now, after that, I generally still remain pretty good employee, but I put special attention in that first 3 months. And the reason was this 3 months is kind of like that is kind of setting the tone for the longer term relationship. And if you set the tone that early on that cheating is a thing, that it could happen, then there's no reason to trust that, oh, you'll be better once you get married. Right. And again, I'm not saying that if you don't cheat as a girlfriend, but then you cheat as a wife, like that's acceptable. I'm not saying that either. That's unacceptable. But I'm saying you at least have built a relationship, and perhaps that can be recovered after that point. But I don't think that you should be asking to recover a relationship at girlfriend stage. So let that one go. Let's see what else we got. This one I'll have to read. It's a little bit small. He says, okay, dads need advice on my relationship. My partner, so I'm assuming girlfriend, flirts and chats with other guys all the time when we go out on nights out like below. She doesn't see anything wrong with it, but it's becoming a problem for me and don't really know how to handle it without causing an argument. So, and he's got a picture of his wife, like I guess flirting with the guy sitting next to them. Um, so again, it's hard to say, I don't know what he means by partner. I'm going to assume girlfriend. So in other words, they're not formally married. And I will say, I wouldn't get, I wouldn't send her packing just yet. But what I would do is sit down and say, look, this needs to end. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is not acceptable. I am, and the way I would phrase this, I don't like the idea of saying you will not do this. Instead, I think you should phrase it like this. If you're going to do this behavior, we will not be together. So you're defining your boundaries, right? You're not telling her what to do. You're like, look, you can go do that. You just cannot have a relationship with me if you do. And I will cut this relationship off, right? Like, because I think this is a big deal. And I would never tolerate it. I would never do it for sure. Like, even when I'm on social media now, you will almost never see me even like compliment a woman for her clothing. Like every great once in a while, if it's something kind of special and I've got a mutual and they're like, hey, I went and did this thing, or hey, something, I might say, hey, you look really good in that. It's very simple, but nothing that could be perceived as flirtatious. Nothing that I wouldn't want my wife to see. Nothing that I believe would ever at any point make her upset or feel uncomfortable. That's to me the proper way to manage a relationship. And so if you've got somebody that's not doing that, one, I think it's a bit of a red flag, but it's possible to overcome it by simply setting your boundary and saying, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but this particular thing, if you keep doing it, we will not be together. That's my red line. That's my boundary. And you can either respect that or we part ways. And it's a tough conversation, but as a man, that's part of being a man. You got to have tough conversations sometimes with people in general. I've had them. Every man's had them. Get used to it. What else we got? All right, let's see. Hey, Kings. Hey, that's me. My middle name is Leroy, which is French for the king. He's talking to me. Hey, Kings, need some advice. I've been feeling alone in life. I have family around, but I feel like I'm alone in this world. This is partly because I was always bullied in school and throughout my adult life. I feel like I have no self-confidence anymore. I guess my question is, how do I get my self-confidence back? So I read this is way early on the internet, like early 2000s. I remember reading this story, and this guy wanted to build up his own self-confidence. And so he did this thing where he was like, I'm going to make it was like 50 requests, or like, it was like one request a day for 50 days or something like that. And he was like, every day he's going to ask for something, and he's just basically going to step out of his comfort zone. And so, like, for example, and I'm trying to remember how he phrased it exactly, but he would go to a store and he might just say, are there any discounts I can get for this item? Didn't matter. The goal wasn't to necessarily get what he was asking for, although that would have been good. The goal was to train himself to be more confident out and about. And so he documented every one of these. And some of them were kind of small and no big deal. Some of them were a big deal. Like, I think, I can't remember exactly, but I think he might have asked a girl for her number, like now I don't recommend this because Obviously, if you're a dad, there's a good chance that you're married, so don't be going asking for women's numbers. But just think of things that you can ask that get you to step out of your comfort zone and just commit to doing one per day, because it's scary at first. I tried it. I last like 3 days and I was like, the heck with this. This is dumb. And a lot of it is because the ideas that I was coming up with were like pretty crazy. Like, like, can I have a free pizza at Domino's? Like, no, you can't have a free. Why would we give you a free pizza? So I couldn't come up with any good ones. But if you can, I would recommend that, just to kind of learn to step out of your comfort zone, and it could be small things. It could be big things. There's a saying in the real estate community. They say, if if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. And so think of it this way. If you come up with an idea and it doesn't cause you a little intimidation, then maybe it's not big enough, or maybe it's perfectly sized, right? But you want a little intimidation perhaps. So that would be what I recommend, right? To build your self-confidence, because these are one-offs, right? And you can choose what you want throughout the day. And it just builds upon each other. And so if you committed for, like, say 30 days, and you're going to say, I'm going to make a request of somebody that I think might get rejected every day for 30 days, and then document it, and then go back and look at that and just be like, wow, look what I accomplished. I went out and stepped out of my comfort zone, and I asked people, I look at this one time I asked this guy, and look at this other one. Man, I can't believe I did that. Right? You'll look back and you'll be surprised at yourself. And then you can be like, look at yourself and be like, wow, I actually have more inside of me than I was giving myself credit for. So I think it's a perfect answer. I think it's a perfect way to accomplish that. And maybe I'll go back and actually write that answer in. I just grabbed some screenshots. Okay, let's see. Here's another good one. How do you balance work, parenting, and your own mental health? The exact opposite. Mental health first, then parenting, then work. I know you can argue and say work is first, but I think parenting first, because for starters, part of being a good parent is going to work. Like, if my son, like, I saw my dad get up and go to work every day without fail. He might have had a sick day here and there, but very rarely. If he didn't go to work, he was on vacation, or there was an emergency, like a real emergency, like somebody died or something. Not like, hey, my sink is overflowing or something. Like, not that kind of emergency, which can be an emergency. But maybe that wasn't a good example. What I'm trying to get at is, there are some things that we perceive as emergencies and they're really not. So we got to decipher between those. So start with your mental health. You work on your parenting, and then you worry about work. Because number one, if you don't have your mental health in order, everything is going to be disheveled. All of it. Parenting, work, your relationships, your hobbies, all of it's going to be out of whack. So you first and foremost have to take care of your mental health. What does that mean? That's going to vary from individual to individual. What is causing you mental health issues? You're going to have to identify those, and you're going to have to identify ways that you can address them. Without knowing them, I could spend the next couple of hours talking about any number of different things that impact your mental health. So I can't speak specifically to this man's mental health, but I can say you address that first and foremost. And you have to identify, like, what is it? Maybe it's just since we're talking about relationships, maybe it's a significant other that is, every time you go out, she's flirting with somebody. And that's really stressing you out because it's making you feel very uncomfortable, making you feel very insecure in your relationship. You need to address that, right? You need to say, all right, look, and you need to address it in a good way. Like, don't just be like, I told you, like, not like that, guys. So address your mental health, identify the causes of it. Perhaps you need medication, but hopefully not. And I would argue that in most cases, you probably don't. There are cases where it's necessary, right? But you got to figure that out. Maybe it's just a matter of taking up some time to go exercise and just give yourself some free time, and, your body, something to kind of help burn off the stress, if you will, and to allow your mind to kind of clear itself, right? Maybe that's it. Maybe that's all you got to do. Maybe you need to do some meditation. Maybe you need to stop drinking. Maybe a lot of different things. You got to figure it out. But I would start there. Mental health, then work on parenting. Because if your mental health is in good order, then you could be a good parent. And if you need to really balance work because maybe you got a heavy schedule, that will help out. You'll be able to balance those two better. But I don't think that you should be trying to balance all three. Mental health is the number one priority. All right. Let's see. I think we got a couple more here. All right. We got this one here. Dads, we advanced our son into a toddler bed since he was climbing out. Now, every night between midnight and 3 a.m., he comes to our bed. How do we break him of doing this so he stays in his bed all night? It's interesting. I don't know that you need to. I mean, it depends on, like if you're thinking toddler, I'm thinking like 3 or 4 years old. We didn't. We just let him keep coming in. And then eventually our son just naturally started sleeping in his own bed. Right. Now we didn't let him come in first thing. We let him come in the middle of the night. Now, another way, if you're like, hey, we don't prefer that for one reason or another, like, hey, some families are different. Then one idea that I saw in this comments, somebody said, hey, just usher him back into bed nicely and politely. Maybe go sit down, in his room and let him fall asleep again. Right. And that works too. And we've done that. Like there have been times where my son has come in and I'll say, what's going on, buddy? And, he'll be upset about something or whatever. And sometimes we'll just let him stay with us. And sometimes I'll take him back. Right. Just kind of varies. And so I think either one of those could work. Either of those are fine. But I don't think it's really that big of a deal. I don't think personally, in my opinion, it's not that big of a deal until they get to school age, until they start going to school. And I don't mean preschool. I mean like kindergarten school. Because I think that's the age where, if they start saying like, yeah, I sleep in my mom's bed, their friends are going to be like, yeah, well, I don't do that. Right. And so then you kind of get them set up for failure. So I think before they go to school, you work it out if they're still doing it. But I think it's also possible that you could just let them do it and they will eventually on their own naturally start staying in their own bed. That's what I got to say about that. Let's see. Last one here. And let's see. What's up, dads? What's up, man? Need some help. Does anyone else have an anxiety problem when their kid is sick? I just can't shake this feeling. He's 17 months old. Brother, I feel you. I really feel you, brother. Man, I tell you what, when my son got sick, I was a basket case. You know that song Basket Case by Green Day? Like they wrote it about future me. They wrote it about the dad that I was going to end up being. Like I would go in when he was sleeping in his crib and I would peek in to see if he was, like I knew he was asleep because he would be crying if he wasn't, but I would peek in to see if he was alive. I'm not joking. And like babies, they don't really breathe very, it's not like you can't necessarily see their breathing. Like they're not like where they're moving. And so I would like get really close to see if I could see his belly going up and down, or I'd like put my hand over his mouth to see if like I could feel air coming out, because I was super paranoid. And when he got sick, like there was one time he got sick, we had like 3 thermometers in the house. One of them was one of those that's like does it by the ear and the forehead, so it's kind of questionable whether you should accept it. But I tested that one. I tested 2 regular thermometers. The kind that go in their mouth or in their rear. And I still wasn't satisfied. I was like, because I think my metabolism was off. I think I was just stressed out. And so to me, he felt really, really warm, but I think it was actually me. I think I was kind of feeling a bit cold. And so he felt warmer than he actually was. And so I was flipping out. And it was funny because one of our friends is a doctor and we had her on the phone and she goes, so DL, let me get this right. You tried 3 different thermometers. He's not showing a fever on any one of them. And you still think he has a fever? And she wasn't mean. She wasn't rude. She just kind of pointed out, she was like 3 thermometers. And then when she said it out loud to me, I was like, oh yeah, you're right. I tried 3 thermometers. Every one of them came back good. What am I spazzing out about here? And so it helped bring me back down to earth. So how do you deal with this? Number 1, talk to other people who've had babies. That like make some friends If you like figure it out, because and then just be like, hey, look, can I call you if I'm having a struggle? Because with my wife and I couldn't necessarily reach out to her because she's a brand new mom too. We were both equally brand new as parents. And so it just like, even if she was trying to comfort me, it didn't feel comforting because it was like, yeah, but what if you're wrong? Right. Whereas if you're talking to somebody who's had several kids and they're like, oh, yeah, that happens all the time. No big deal, blah, blah, blah. That's a little bit more reassuring. So get you some friends with kids that are older than yours and just kind of have them on your speed dial. I mean, with their permission. Don't call people up randomly, that didn't ask to be called up, but that's one way you can do it. Another way is just to keep in your mind, remember that you're new and a lot of things are going to be scary. And it's okay. Like breathing patterns. That one flipped us out. Our son, one night we were kind of flipping out because I was flipping out because he was just crying and it just felt different. Maybe it wasn't, but it felt different. I woke my wife up. We went to the ER. We're sitting in the parking lot. We're on the phone with our doctor friend. It's like 2 a.m. And all of a sudden he's breathing. And I noticed that his breathing would be like very fast paced. Then it would be slow. So he'd be like, and then the next moment it would just be like, and then all of a sudden he would stop breathing for like 10 seconds. And I was like, what? And I was flipping out because I'm like, why is he not breathing? I'm like, and it's just like, there is so much about babies that if you've never had one, they will trip you out. Right. And now that he's older, I'm back to my normal self. Like, dude, that's just a scratch. You'll be fine. Go out and play. I barely see any blood. There's not that much blood. So go play. You don't need a Band-Aid for that. I can't even see the scratch and you want a Band-Aid. He does get Band-Aids, but now I'm back to my normal self where I'm a little bit more regulated and I'm not as anxious. Okay. But I feel you, brother. And I think number one, good dad. Like, it's good if you're a little on the anxious side. It's not bad if you're not, but it's good if you are. Like, I think that's a good sign because you're invested in your child. That's a good thing. So kudos to you on that. But you do need to rein that in. You got to remember a lot of things that you don't know seem scary, but they're really not. Find you some people that you can confide in and talk to them and help them address your concerns. Existing parents are usually good for that because they can tell you several stories and make you feel a lot better. But that's basically it. All right, let's see what else we got. Anything else in the? I don't see anything in the comments here. Yes. Just realized Liberty Dad is 5 followers away from 100. Go follow DL on Rumble. Yes, please do that. Go to Rumble, sign up if you haven't, follow me, because once I hit 100, I will be eligible to participate in their creator program, which means I could make some money. Ching! It's kind of cool having little buttons on the ready for that. So let's make that happen. I thought I saw that I was 3 away, but it's possible that a couple fell off. But I'm only a few away. So if you could do me that favor, that'd be great. Otherwise, I think that's the end of the show. So let me double check and make sure there's nothing in the chat over there on X. So we're good to go. So that means we're out. Guess what, guys? Before I go tonight, 6:15, I'm taking my son and I'm going with another dad and his son, and we're going to dad it up at the Minecraft movie. So that ought to be exciting. My son's favorite video game, what he watches on YouTube all the time. So we're going to have a blast tonight at about 6:15. We're going to watch Minecraft movie. And looking forward to that. Otherwise, have a great weekend, folks. And I'm out. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. You can also become part of the community by heading over to libertydad.locals.com. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.